Okay, well, welcome to this session. It's going to be mainly focused about accelerating your SAP Business Transformation with SAP Cloud ALM. This is a follow-up session from last April with a webinar that we were just talking about the synergy between SAP LeanIX, SAP Signavio, and SAP Cloud ALM. The focus today is going to be mainly about the implementation area. We're going to be running a live session so you can see how the implementation works. And we're going to be just touching a few areas in SAP Signavio. Let me introduce the RapidX team. My name is Jose Cabrita. I am a product owner for SAP Cloud ALM with more than 10 years of experience with project implementation in the ALM framework for change management, test management, and business operations. Then I got my colleague Gary. He is a product owner for business process optimization. He has more than 20 years in the business, and he's a certified SAP Signavio and Celonis consultant. And last but not least, my colleague Jack Bryan. He's a product owner for SAP testing. He has more than 10 years in process implementation, especially focusing on the test management area. SAP Cloud ALM, obviously we've been through some catch-ups with Ben. So what I want to say is basically this software has been developed for application lifecycle management and is mainly focused to support hybrid solution. I'm talking about on-premise and cloud, and is completely aligned with the SAP Activate methodology. And it's mainly focusing on a few core capabilities, where we go the onboard. This is where you welcome the users. You're going to be assigning them with roles. They're going to be part of the specific teams for the implementation. Then we move to the design phase. Here, you're going to be running your fit to standard workshop. You're going to be customizing the processes that are going to be relevant for the implementation. This can be done with SAP Signavio. And then we're going to create the requirements that are going to be part of the initial backlog. We move to the build phase, and here depending on the nature of the implementation that you're working on, you're going to have access to a project template. We're talking about an S4 implementation, SuccessFactors, Ariba, Concur, or you can have a cross-project implementation as well. Then the requirements are going to be break down into user stories or tasks, just to ensure that every single requirement is going to be delivered during the whole implementation. And then we're going to ensure that we use the reporting capabilities and the analytics to ensure that we keep a track of the whole project. We move to this test phase. You're going to be organizing the test plans that are going to be relevant for this implementation, user acceptance testing, functional integration testing, or regression testing. And this can be done manually using SAP Cloud ALM, where you can just create test scripts and execute it directly from the system, or you can also bring Tricentis as the main engine for running for doing execution automatically. Then we move to the deploy phase. At this point, you're going to be planning the releases, orchestrating all the deployments to production, and then we're going to also enable changes and enable traceability just to make sure that all the changes that you do in your landscape are going to be tracked in the system. And finally, we move to the innovate phase. This is when the solution is already in production. You keep monitoring the whole performance, and you are looking for potential improvement that you have right now in production. Before we dive into the whole session, I would like just to kindly ask you if you can scan the QR code. We have a few questions. It's just basically to have a better understanding of the whole audience today, and that helps us to run the whole session. So yeah, let me just click on start. So yeah, it will take a couple of minutes. The first one is mainly about the implementation with Cloud ALM. Are you planning just to implement? Are you currently working on this implementation? Okay. Okay, a few good answers here. Well, it's good to see many of you already working on the implementation. So yeah, that's good. So hopefully the session today is going to help you to understand more about this area. Excellent. So let's move to the next question. This is more related to the use cases. Obviously, we've got some areas for the operation side and some areas for the implementation side. These are the ones that we consider that more common during implementation, and we're going to be covering this area today. So yeah, it's good to see. Yeah, system health monitoring is also quite popular. Business process monitoring as well. So yeah, excellent. Thank you very much. Good. The next one is going to be related to SAP Signavio, how familiar you are with this platform. Okay, we've got some expert users, that's good to see. So yeah, and you have some of you got a basic understanding. So yeah, today hopefully you're gonna walk out of this session understanding more about SAP Signavio. My colleague Gary still is gonna cover this area. And the final question is about how you currently model your business processes. Are you using any particular software? Are you using SAP Solution Manager, Visio? Excellent. Good. So yeah, thank you very much for the answers. I think that with this is going to help you just to drive the whole session from here onwards. So yeah, without any further delay, I'm going to now welcome my colleague Gary Steele.
Hi everyone, welcome to everybody, and lovely to see so many faces. Before we jump into the systems, which I'm sure you're itching for us to do, I just wanted to recap on the focus group webinar that we held back in April, where we focused on the importance of people in your transformation project. The core components that you need for a successful transformation is one thing, but you do need people with the right mindset, people enthusiastic, people that are vested in what you're trying to do in transformation. So I just want to recap here in terms of the interplay, the relationship that Ben touched upon in terms of those three core components. So, and sorry Ben, we have actually put the SAP Linux logo on for you here. Let's start with the middle here with SAP Signavio. And I see that some of you in the poll there are not particularly familiar with SAP Signavio, but this is SAP's process management and process optimization tool. Strategically, this is what SAP-centric customers should be using to manage their processes going forward. And it contains a whole raft of value accelerators, best practice content, customer journeys. Now that's really important because we always think about developing processes for my own internal needs, but actually we should also be thinking about what is it our customers want. So what are the touch points with our customers? What are the things that really matter to them? So you can start to design your processes from not only your perspective, but from your customers as well. At the bottom here, we've got process mining and analysis. Now, there's a huge amount of capability now with SAP Signavio. There's two components, process insights and process intelligence. One is more of a mining tool, the other one is more of a root cause analysis tool that comes with a whole host of recommendations and correction advice for preparation for a move to S/4HANA. And then we go to essentially what is SAP Signavio's DNA, which is process design. So the process management capability of Signavio is its bread and butter. This is what it was built for. And it's hugely sophisticated and very, very mature a product. Now, this is the area that we're going to be focusing a little bit more on today rather than the other capabilities of SAP Signavio around that process design and particularly the relationship it has with SAP Cloud ALM. Let's move on to SAP Linux, and I know Ben touched upon this. It is SAP's new enterprise architecture management tool. Now that essentially means that we have a whole bunch of different processes that we're running in our organization, but they need to run on something. And what we lack at the moment is that visibility of the applications, the technology landscape that we have, and all of the complexity that it entails. We just don't know how that exists. Do we have the necessary systems we require to be able to fulfill the organization's capabilities? And by that we mean, what do we need to run and to do in order to be successful, to be able to deliver to our customers? So that interrelationship is really, really important. SAP see that strategically, and this is why they acquired SAP Linux back in November 2023. Signavio, for the rest of you that don't know, was acquired in 2021. So we're talking about 3 years ago, more or less now. Okay, so if we look more from an SAP Signavio and SAP Cloud perspective, what we're going to be demonstrating to you is an end-to-end process implementation. We're not going to go into a huge amount of detail, but we want to cover the main activities that SAP Signavio and Cloud ALM cover in that aspect. So SAP Signavio is there to design the to-be process. So you're in your ECC, you're looking to move to S/4HANA. Ben already touched upon the clean core concept. Now, the recommendation is always try to do a fit to standard, try to reduce complexity, not only complexity in how you run your processes going forward, but complexity in how you achieve that. So you're reducing on two fronts. So you want to design your to-be process, SAP Signavio. We will then transfer that to SAP Cloud ALM to build the new as-is process. Yeah, so that's essentially the relationship. But some people say, well, why SAP Signavio? So again, I want to really iterate how important it is that SAP Signavio doesn't just talk about process management. It encapsulates everything to do with processes. And processes are anchored on two very fundamental key pillars. So process design, we all know, do your processes meet your business requirements? Great. So you design some fantastic processes. But actually, how do you know if they're being executed correctly? How do you know if they're being executed efficiently or compliantly? You don't run into trouble because people are doing maverick things in your systems. So that's what SAP Signavio, in a nutshell, is about. And this is why it is an extremely important tool for any organization looking to transform and to transition to S/4HANA. But then we talk about process management capabilities. Now, we all know that SAP Cloud ALM has some process management capabilities. They're reasonably basic, but they do exist, and that's always going to be enhanced over time. But actually, if you just look very briefly in terms of the comparison between some of the other tools, SAP Cloud ALM and SAP Solution Manager are quite comparable in that scenario. But really, where SAP Signavio wins, hands down, is in this kind of real-time collaboration. And it has, very extensive simulation and scenario capabilities. So you're looking at your as-is process, how important it is to look at what you're doing currently, understand where you have opportunities to improve, but also you've got your existing processes, you know where you want to go, therefore you need to run your fit to standard workshops with a base. You need to understand where you're coming from to understand what effort's required to know to where you need to get to. And the simulation scenario capability of SAP Signavio is very, very mature. And that's something SAP Cloud ALM wouldn't offer, for example. And the reusable components. So you have a dictionary in SAP Signavio, so when you build your processes, you can just literally start picking stuff off the shelf. It really, really facilitates and reduces the complexity and the risk of getting things wrong. because everything's available at your fingertips. And finally, we talk about value accelerators. Now, SAP Scenario also comes with best practice content, which mimics what we see in SAP Cloud ALM. So when we're talking about the interoperability between those two systems, there's actually consistency between them in terms of the best practice content and the processes and the process models that are available there for organizations to essentially kickstart their transformation journey. You don't need to start from scratch. You have a lot of help available to you. The key takeaway here is, it saves a lot of time and effort, SAP Scenario in the sense, lots of pre-packaged accelerators that we'll see soon, real-time collaboration, as I mentioned before. So when you're in your fit gap workshops, you can bring up your process models in SAP Scenario and actually work with them real time. And this is really, really important. So imagine we're sitting in this room, great, we're all together here looking at a screen and we're working on a particular process. And we understand that maybe we need to customize something because the fit standard doesn't really meet all of our business requirements. But there may be somebody sitting halfway around the world who could attend. It's really important that you've got that collaborative functionality in SAP Scenario to enable to introduce people when needed who are stakeholders in what you're trying to achieve, to make decisions quickly and make informed decisions to meet the requirements that you then need to establish in Cloud ALM to enable developers and configurers to actually build the solution and build it to the needs of the business. So what I've done here on this final slide is I've added, basically in the scenario that we're going to see today, how Scenario come into place a little bit with SAP Cloud ALM, but obviously we're focusing predominantly in SAP Cloud ALM around the design to deploy phase. So the project lead will be responsible for setting up the project, setting up the scope, etc. But what I'm going to do is assume the business expert role, which is more around the scoping exercise, defining the requirements. And really, when you get to the requirement stage, that's the transition from what the business needs to what you need to then tell developers to actually start building. And that's when you create user stories, which breaks down those particular requirements into manageable chunks of work that developers can work and start working on. Okay, so obviously these particular activities are split by role or persona. I'm going to be concentrating on the business expert role. So without any further ado, I'll just jump into SAP Cloud ALM. I don't see it here. There we go. Okay, so here we've found ourselves in the Process Collaboration Hub of SAP Scenario. Now, this is the gateway to everything that Scenario has to offer. So I don't think any of you have seen the sort of circular transformation suite diagram, which is very, very popular, and it shows all the different components within SAP Scenario. In the middle is the Collaboration Hub, and that is basically access all areas, all the other components that you are licensed to. And this is the Accelerator Library. Now, the Accelerator Library is essentially out-of-box pre-packaged content, so similar to the best practice content you'll see in Cloud ALM, and that enables you to download or install a whole raft of fit-to-standard, best practice process models and other artifacts that can really help you kickstart your transformation journey. So if I just click on here very, very quickly, we can see that it belongs to SAP Scenario Process Manager. So just to go back, those particular accelerators can be installed either from a process mining perspective in process intelligence in SAP Scenario or in the process manager. And it's the process manager we're going to be looking at today. And you can see here we've got over 800 process modules for the S4HANA Private Cloud Edition. So these are recommended best practice processes for anyone looking to move to S4HANA Cloud Private. And I'm not going to install it today, but essentially what I've done is I've installed it, and then we will find that information, as what it says here, SAP Scenario Process Manager. We go to the Process Manager itself. And I've saved Actually here, I will just load it. It should take a couple of seconds. I'm trusting that the internet is fast enough here, but it shouldn't take very long. And this will show you all of the content that's available in that accelerator. And we can see here, a whole raft of different processes across, all of your application areas and end-to-end processes. And the one thing that makes it very easy to identify between SAP Cloud ALM and SAP Scenario is that they all come with this alphanumeric 3-digit code prefix. So 1E3, that would be 1E3 would be the same. Scenario as it is in Cloud ALM. But I've saved one of these processes here that we're going to look at today. If I just highlight it, this is the process for purchase requisition, as recommended by SAP, as your fit to standard. Okay? Now, you've conducted your fit to standard workshops and you've identified an opportunity for improving that process further. So, well, I'd like to automate something. What would I like to automate? Well, we want to have an approval form that we build in SAP Build Automation, for example, which then enables us to set some parameters and criteria. And if the PR fulfills that criteria, it doesn't need to be approved by the manager. So if I just select here, we can see here, it says the manager has to approve this purchase requisition. And he's getting fed up, having to do that on a regular basis when someone just purchases them toilet paper for the office. It doesn't need that. So let's make that process far more logical and make sure that he's using his time more productively. Okay, so what I need to do here then is, I don't want to work with that particular process. I'm going to make a copy. Where do I want to store it? In the same folder. And here we go. We can see it here. Now I'm just going to double click on that. And what this does is takes us into the Process Manager editor. Now, when we talked about, or when Ben talked about the future integration strategy with SAP, now obviously there's a challenge for this, it's quite complex, but that's the bit that's going to be integrated into SAP Cloud ALM. So essentially they're going to be one and the same thing. It's the editor, it's the ability, which is the highly sophisticated process modeling capability of SAP Scenario. So you can see you've got all your attributes and artifacts, you've got your dictionary items. So you actually get a whole bunch of out-of-the-box stuff that's already provided for you. So you start looking at this and you say, well, okay, that's really interesting. That's what I would like to think about in terms of enhancing my process. So what we're going to do here is, very quickly, I'm just going to drag in an exclusive gateway. Now, exclusive gateway basically says, right, you need to make a yes/no decision. Does it fulfill criteria? Goes this way. If it doesn't, it goes a different way. And I'm just going to introduce a task. Now, try not to scrutinize the accuracy of what I'm trying to do here, but I'm trying to give you, a reasonably realistic impression of how this works. So I'm saying auto PR approval. And you can see it's already starting to propose similar tasks that are already saved within that particular best practice content. So again, you don't have to start from scratch, but I'm for the purpose of this, I'm just, I hit the wrong one there. Apologies, I need to take that out. Do bear with me. Yes. Okay, so we've got auto, and now we need to ensure that we've got the right sequence flow. So we just drag this in here. A little bit fiddly, and it's okay, but one thing is actually still missing in that sequence flow is, well, once it's approved, it's met the criteria of that PR. So it's either, it can be based on the price, is it within a certain price or value, or is it a particular material that the manager's not interested in, as I mentioned before, toilet paper. And we drag it across here and we say, right, okay, I want to convert that automatically to a purchase order. I don't need for that to go any further. Again, a little bit fiddly, so do bear with me. And there we have it. So this is the enhancement that I want to introduce into my process. Now, I want to save that. So I save it. It's telling me I've got an error. Again, this is really, really fundamental about SAP Scenario because it's BPMN, so Business Process Modeling Notation, which is the standard notation for process modeling. It has a very sophisticated engine. So it says, well, actually what you're trying to do there doesn't make sense. This is logical in how you put your process together. So it's telling me I've got an error. And ideally, it will let me save it, but ideally, why would I want to save a process that doesn't work? And it's telling me here that there is a problem. And I know if I go down here, it's going to tell me that the process structure is incorrect. So then I can just go back and just make sure that that is working properly. I think I've gone the other way, haven't I? Bear with me. I do apologize. Now, hopefully, that's going to save now. Now there's no errors. Okay, so I'm happy with that. There are a few warnings, a few hints, but I'm going to save that. Actually, before I do save, I'm just going to make sure that I recognize this by saying the 2B process. I'll keep the date. It should be easy to identify, and now I will save. Again, it's just giving me a warning. Fantastic. Now, what we'd like to do is, if we then go back to our Explorer, that particular process 2B is now here. Now, what I'd like to do is export this, because we're going to transfer that to SAP Cloud ALM to design that solution, build, test, and deploy it. So export as a BPMN diagram. And there you have it. It's downloaded, available for me to use later. Okay, so let's just now switch. I need to once again log in. I just think it's taken out, timed out, unfortunately. And I'm in. So this is essentially the home page of SAP Cloud ALM. We're looking at the implementation scenario today because we are going to deploy a new process, custom process. Now, I won't spend a lot of time in here in terms of the project setup, but if you remember the slide with all the different activities, the guy with the project lead head would be setting up a project and some general information. This SAP Activate roadmap is really important because if you assign that, you get a whole raft of tasks that SAP recommend that you undertake as part of that implementation. If you don't, you need to develop those essentially or add them in yourself manually. So the choice is yours, but that's a really good starting point. We've got some time boxes. So if you're following SAP Activate methodology, then you enter your dates in terms of the various phases, sprints as well, some milestones that you can enter. Enter the team members that are going to be working and going to be responsible for various tasks in your implementation. We've got scopes. Touch upon that a little bit later when we talk about deliverables. So one of your deliverables, for example, is you're conducting your fit to standard workshops. So we've already done that. So you'll see later how we need to ensure that that's kept up to date. The deployment landscape is basically probably going to be your S4HANA system and some scripting information with some external things that you can assign, but not relevant for this particular project. So, okay, so if we go into this particular, if we now go into manage scopes, so rather than go from this particular tab, I'm going to go into this left section. These tabs you'll become more and more familiar with as the more time you spend with them. The icons will become very recognizable. We've got a couple of scopes that are under this particular header of a project, and we're going to look at S4HANA sourcing and procurement. And what we see here is some scenarios, two scenarios. One is that best practice content. So remember in SAP scenario, we have the value accelerator for 2023 S4HANA Cloud Private Edition. It's exactly the same here. Now, the content is not like for like, 100%, but the best practice content recommended in here mimics largely what we have available in SAP scenario. But because we're developing a custom process, that's not good enough. We need to have what is known as a custom solution scenario because we are modifying an existing best practice process. So this is where we go into process scoping. And in here, we can see a whole raft of different custom processes that have been added. And, the list is endless with all the best practice stuff that's in there, 559 solution processes. But we're not interested in that. We need to go into what is known as process authoring. So this is a functionality that's really important that enables us to create a custom process. And we've got some custom processes here, but we need to create a brand new one. Or we have to create a brand new one because we've designed it in SAP scenario and we've already downloaded it, so it's ready for import. So auto PR process, for example, doesn't matter. We assign it to the business process that it belongs to, sourcing and procurement. Is it country specific? So one of the things that within SAP scenario is that you can, collaborate with people, and in collaborating, you can essentially define whether that particular process is going to be generic or maybe country or region specific, maybe down to tax jurisdiction or what have you. Okay, so I'm not going to put any other information in there for the time being, and I'll just save that. Now we go to the solution value flow, and what you can do here is that you can start to define the interaction of that process with other processes. You hit the edit button and you can start to drag in, and it's going to ask me to enter a title, let's say raise PR approval form, I'll put it in here. And you can have a sequential nature of different processes that interact with each other. But the solution process flow is where we really start to mean business. So here we would create a process. At the moment, it's empty. We don't have a process. So we want to create a process from a BPMN file. And if we look into here, we can see that's the file that I downloaded today. And I would upload that file, and it's instantaneous. And you can see this is the file that I uploaded, and it's going to have my enhancement. Now, in SAP scenario, you can be quite clever, but you can put color coding and all sorts of things to add a little bit of visibility as to what it is that you're amending. It's not replicated when you transfer to SAP Cloud ALM, but you can see it is all here. Fantastic. So now we publish that to say, right, we've got it embedded in SAP Cloud ALM, need to work on it. So if we go into scoping once more, we then need to ensure that that particular process is included in our scope. So when we go into process scoping once again, that particular process, now I hope this is the one that I just created, I believe. Please tell me if I'm correct. And we say end scoping. So what we're doing is we're selecting those processes that we want to include in our scope for this implementation. And there we have it. So we can go back into that process, go back into the solution flow. Now the next step is defining the business requirements. Yeah, so this is, as I mentioned before, the moment where that transition from what the business has been doing in terms of the fit gap workshops, and now we're translating that into what the developers and configurers need to do in order to make that happen. And we can go into a particular, into the particular task, click on it. I can create a requirement directly from the task, that is the enhancement, or I can create it from up here very, very quickly. And that's what I'm going to do right now from here. And it will default the requirement for auto PR. You can amend that, and obviously you just type in a whole bunch of detailed requirements. So the development team, the technical guys, start to understand what it is that the business wants. And it's at this point that I will be handing over to Jose to go into the more technical aspects of this. I will save this particular one at this point, and he's going to need to use this later on. Just before I finish up, I just wanted to quickly go into the analytics content. So Ben touched upon the analytics, integrated analytics. So there's a great dashboarding capability. Jose is going to go into more detail because he will have more to work with, because he's going to be building artifacts through that process. I've just started. But you can see here we've got some unassigned tasks. What are they? And schedule fit to standard. Well, scheduled now. It's complete. I've done that bit, so it's done. Conduct it. It's done. And confirm scope and requirements, not yet done, but I could say it's in progress. Okay. So at that point is when my colleague Jose will pick up that requirement and start to build user stories. As I mentioned before, it's breaking that down into manageable chunks to be able to do that.
Can I just ask a quick question?
So, yeah, any questions?
On the so when you move from process editor and pull it into ALM, is there a way of forcing it through governance, process governance, so that anyone who needs to sign off that change to the process before it goes into ALM to be developed is managed? Or would you expect that just to be in the session that you're in because it's part of this fit?
Well, there's some flexibility. Yeah, I mean, you can get it published. That's that's an interesting question, because the moment where you want to publish a particular process, at what point do you do that? Because the publication of the process should be, let's say, the scenario where you've taken that process into Cloud ALM, you've tested it, but then you realise that you need to modify it slightly. Do you put it back into SAP scenario to do that, or do you do it within Cloud ALM? Our advice is, again, there is flexibility, but our advice is, if it's talking about a minimum change, you would do it within SAP Cloud ALM, and then you publish that and you work with it, and then you would import that back into SAP scenario through governance and say, that's our finished product, we're happy with that, we publish it. And that's what we go live with. If it's really majorly complex, then it may make more sense that we would kind of start again, start the overall process and go back to SAP scenario. That will be our recommendation. Another question?
So when you import process, right? When
So-
you imported the file from Signal, so
Yes.
is there any other way you can import it other than this Signal file? What if I already have built process one?
Well, yeah, I mean, you can import Visio diagrams. That's probably something I didn't really touch upon very much here, is, where SAP scenario really adds value is, anyone at the moment not currently using, a dedicated process management tool for modeling their processes, and you've got everything on a Visio diagram. What will happen? You end up storing it in a folder somewhere. It's unlikely to get touched. And if it does, it's a real handful to try and get that up to date and make it meaningful. At the end of the day, it will be irrelevant. If that's your starting point for your fit to standard, but it doesn't actually reflect what you currently do, it's a worthless piece of paper. Yeah, so from a diagramming, kind of illustration tool perspective, Signavio really is the future. You would not want to be doing that, for very much longer, because you really will start to lose that competitive edge that your organisation needs, because you won't know what you're doing. You don't know where you're starting from. You don't really know where to go to. And even if you do model your process correctly, within 6 months, it's going to be old hat, isn't it? Yeah, so you can import Visio diagrams and other different formats into SAP Scenario to then commence, from a BPMN perspective, to start building your new 2B processes. But also you've got that, talking before around the simulation capability. It's amazing. You can put in your Visio diagrams and you can start simulating with your 2B, understand where the differences lie, resource, cost analysis. So you can start to understand what's the cost impact of changing a process. Is it going to be favorable or otherwise? It goes into a lot of detail, but that's really subject to a different day, a different session where we could talk about SAP scenario in far more depth in terms of encapsulating everything that scenario has to offer in this area. I just wanted to demonstrate the relationship we carry out.